If you clicked on this video, you're here for one reason. What actually happened to Howl's heart after the movie? It's a question that lived in the minds of fans for nearly 20 years. When Sophie places his heart back into his chest, when Calcifer floats free, and when the war dissolves around them, the film ends on kinda like a joyful moment of resolution. But Studio Ghibli loves leaving emotional consequences unspoken, letting the audience imagine the aftermath for themselves. And in the case of Howl's Moving Castle, the aftermath is enormous. So before we jump into the theories, which we will do in episodes 2 and 3, the first episodes exist to lay the groundwork. This is the foundation you need in order to understand what truly might have happened to Howl after his heart was restored. And trust me, once we break it down, the next episodes will feel 100 times easier. Let's begin with the moment everything started, the night Howl lost his heart. The film shows it as a glowing childhood memory of his, a young boy stepping out onto the night, witnessing a falling star land in a small crater. In Diana Jones's book, the scene is more explicit, but the emotional truth is still the same. Howl doesn't stumble into this situation, he chooses it for himself. He sees a dying star, a life on the verge of extinction, and he reacts not with fear, but with empathy. It's one of the first defining traits of his character. Wonder mixed with compassion. Calcifer in his tiny star form is helpless, a being of pure fire on the cusp of going out forever. He needs a home, a way to survive in the human world, and Howl, far too young to understand the consequences, offers the thing that sustains life and governs emotion. His own heart. He tears it out in an ancient, powerful, self-sacrificial spell that binds the two of them together. Calcifer becomes Howl's literal life force, burning in place of the heart that Howl no longer possesses. And young Howl, probably without realizing the enormity of what he's doing, becomes heartless. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally, heartless. And this is where everything that happens in the movie pretty much begins. Howl grows up with no emotional compass, no growing, no regulator for fear, responsibility, or maturity. He becomes a magical prodigy, but an emotional disaster. His heartless state isn't a quirky fantasy element, it's the source of his volatility, his avoidance, his dramatics, and his fear of commitment. To be heartless in Ghibli's storytelling language is to be unanchored. Think of The Witch at the Waste, a woman consumed by her desires, hollowed out by obsessions. Howl isn't evil like her, but he's walking the same unstable path. He has tremendous magical power and almost no emotional stability to wield it. This is why he panics over small things, like his hair dye going wrong, because emotional reactions hit him with no filter, no moderation whatsoever. Without a heart, his emotions either overwhelm him instantly, or never reach him at all. There is no middle ground. This is why his choices are inconsistent. He is capable of immense kindness, freeing Sophie from the curse, shielding her from the witch, helping civilians in the war, but he's also capable of running away from every hard conversation, every responsibility, and every confrontation with his own fears. He is a man with the intellect of an adult and the emotional regulation of a child. And Calcifer, in all this, isn't just a companion or a servant. He is Howl's substitute heart, his emotional buffer, his magical stabilizer, like the engine that powers everything. Calcifer keeps Howl warm in the literal sense, but he also keeps Howl psychologically intact. He absorbs the emotional strain that Howl cannot process. He regulates the magical output that Howl cannot control, and he keeps the physical body alive with the fire instead of blood. This is why Calcifer says that he'll die if he gives up the heart. It's not melodrama, it's psychology and physiology. He's been functioning as Howl's circulatory system, spiritual metabolism, emotional stabilizer, and power core for years. Once the heart returns, Calcifer effectively is evicted from the center of Howl's being. He's not just losing a contract, he's losing a home, and Howl is losing the magical buffer that prevented him from collapsing under the weight of his own power. This reality is extremely important for the theories that we'll explore soon, because once the heart comes back, Howl isn't just normal again, he's becoming something new, but we'll get to that later. Now, to understand what the heart meant to Howl, we need to understand why he became monstrous during the war. The bird-like transformation is more than a cool visual sequence, it's the physical manifestation of everything that's wrong with him. The more Howl fights, the more he becomes a creature shaped by fear, rage, and the absence of emotional grounding. The witch warns Sophie that every transformation brings Howl closer to a disappearing forever act. She's not exaggerating, Howl is genuinely losing himself, his identity, his humanity, his stability, because he's channeling raw magic without a heart to keep him tethered. This is why returning his heart is life or death. Without it, he would eventually become a full monster, unable to turn back. Calcifer could only protect him for so long. The war was accelerating the corruption. By the time Sophie reaches him in the sky, Howl's body is on the brink of collapse. His magic is in chaos, and his sense is self-eroding. He doesn't just need his heart back, he is dying without it. This is the moment where Sophie steps in, and Sophie's magic is one of the most misunderstood elements of the whole movie. It's subtle, emotional, intuitive, not flashy. She doesn't shoot spells or bend time in a traditional wizardry sense. Instead, her magic works through compassion, clarity, bravery, and emotional honesty. She can touch hearts, literally and metaphorically, because she sees people as they are, not as they pretend to be. She breaks curses by understanding the person beneath them. She enters dreams not by force, but by resonance. She navigates illusions because she's grounded in truth. Sophie is the only character in the story capable of safely handling Howl's heart because she is the only character who approaches him without fear, without illusion, and without agenda. She understands him, maybe better than he understands himself. When she places his heart back into his chest, she's not performing a surgical procedure, she's completing an emotional circuit. She's anchoring Howl to reality, to humanity, and to love. She's giving him the ability to feel in full for the first time since his childhood. And the consequences of that, well, those are the heart of episodes 2 and 3. But before we leave episode 1, we need to reflect on what the heart represents in Ghibli storytelling, because this will become the backbone of every theory that follows. In Studio Ghibli films, the heart is never just a biological organ, it is an identity, it is truth, it is the seat of emotion, responsibility, vulnerability, and growth. To lose it is to lose connection to one's humanity, to regain it is to transform. Chihiro earns her name back and regains her sense of self. Nausicaa sacrifices herself and becomes a Christ-like figure of compassion. San straddles the line between human and wolf and finds her integrity. Ghibli's message is consistent. The state of the heart determines the state of the soul. Howl regaining his heart is not the closure of this story, it is the beginning of it. When the organ returns to his chest, he isn't just healed, he is reborn. He now has to process emotions that he's never handled before. He has to face responsibilities he spent years avoiding. He has to navigate fears that he's never allowed himself to acknowledge. He has to relearn magic because his power source has fundamentally changed. And he has to figure out who he is now that he is whole. Think about it. Howl has not felt fear, love, loss, pain, responsibility, or longing in a genuine, grounded way since he was a child. When the heart comes back, all those deferred emotions will come rushing in. The floodgate is open. So, episode 1 leaves us at a crucial pivot point. We've established who Howl was before the ending. A powerful but unstable wizard, a heartless man with a child's emotional toolkit, a soul protected for years by a fire demon acting as a surrogate heart, and a being on the brink of losing himself forever. That is the Howl Sophie saves, and now we can stand at the doorstep of the real mystery. What happens when a man like that gets his heart back? What changes? What breaks? What awakens? In part 1, we kind of set the whole vibe. Hearts in Ghibli movies are never just organs. Howl is basically a myth creature running on loopholes, and the world he lives in treats emotions as literal magic. So now we're finally getting closer to the part where we can talk about Howl's heart specifically. This part is basically the halfway point where we look at what kind of heart Sophie actually returned, because it definitely wasn't the one that he gave up. So imagine this. The war ends, the castle stops exploding sideways, Calcifer finally gets a break, and everything goes quiet. Suddenly, Howl has this thing beating in his chest again, and it's not just like, oh cool, I guess this is what blood circulation feels like. It's more like waking up after a lifetime of being emotionally half muted. Imagine if someone handed you every feeling you skipped since childhood in one instant. That's basically what happened. There's actually a long-running fan idea that Howl has become emotionally paused since he gave his heart away. Not immature in the annoying anime protagonist way, but genuinely underdeveloped. Like a kid who grew up everywhere except on the inside. And honestly, it tracks. His tantrums over his hair, peak teen meltdown, his habits of disappearing when things get tough, avoidant teenager behavior, his whole vibe of I will die if you make me clean. Honestly, it's relatable, but also it's kind of like arrested development. So when Sophie puts his heart back, that's not just healing, it's a massive emotional update. Like he's been running on Wizard OS 1.0 and suddenly someone installed a 30-year patch all at once. That's theory number 1. Howl basically gets emotionally overwhelmed by finally having a fully functioning heart again, which is actually kind of beautiful and tragic, and hilarious if you picture him suddenly crying at random things because his body is like, surprise, your emotional processing is downloading. But that's not the only surface level chaos, because here's where things get deeper. The heart he gets back isn't clean. This thing has history. Calcifer has been living in it for years. That heart has been used as a literal power core, a furnace, a magical contract, and a weapon. It's been holding the castle together, keeping Howl alive, and maybe even amplifying his abilities. You don't just plug that back into someone and expect it to behave like a normal human organ again. This is where we start thinking about what the heart remembers. Not literally, but it's more symbolically, emotionally, mythically. In fairy tales, the kind Miyazaki pulls from hearts that get taken out but never get back unchanged. They gather meaning, they absorb magic, they become artifacts. So a big chunk of this part is us basically asking, what does a star-powered, demon-fused, decades-travelled heart even feel like when it becomes back at home? Some fans think Howl suddenly has echoes of all the magic that happened while the heart was outside of him. Not spells exactly, but sensations, the feelings of flying through dimensions, the heat of Calcifer, the terror of being responsible for the castle's existence. It's like when you wake up from a nightmare that wasn't yours. It's not overwhelming, but it's not normal either. That opens up another theory that people love. Howl and Calcifer are permanently linked even after the contract breaks. Not in a they share a body way, but in a you can't be two souls that close for that long and then suddenly untangle cleanly kind of way. Like when you live with someone for 5 years and afterwards you still know exactly how they step on the stairs even when they're gone. And honestly, that might be why Howl looks so calm at the end of the movie. He's finally at peace, yes, but he also finally understands what Calcifer really did for him. There's a layer of guilt and gratitude there that the movie doesn't say out loud, but it's there if you look. That actually leads perfectly into the darker interpretation. Howl's heart returns carrying all the emotional weight that Calcifer carried for him. Think about it. Calcifer literally kept Howl alive. He took the hits, held the magic together, felt fear for him, suffered for him, and Howl had the audacity to go around pretending he's just a slither outer. Calcifer did the heavy lifting of adulthood, while Howl simply avoided it. So when the heart comes back, some fans think it comes back heavy, sad, exhausted, not broken but worn out, like someone who finally comes home after years in war and suddenly needs to learn how to live with peace again. But okay, let's shift gears and talk about the romantic angle, because this is a fan deep dive and we would be legally obliged to mention it. There's a surprisingly popular idea that when Sophie holds Howl's heart, something actually imprints. Not magic, but a sort of emotional binding, because hearts in Ghibli movies kind of choose people. Think of Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, even The Wind Rises. They have loyalty, they have memory. So people argue that Howl's restored heart now orients itself around Sophie, whether he likes it or not. Not in a creepy way, just in the sense that she becomes the heart's most recent home, which would explain Howl's emotions stabilize or destabilize based on her present. His magic might too, if he loves her. It strengthens. If he fears losing her, it might wobble. This gives a really natural explanation for why Howl seems calmer at the end, like totally different for how he was during most of the film. The heart has an anchor now. Then there's the opposite argument, that Howl actually loses some of his magical powers once his heart is restored. Because the trade with Calcifer wasn't symbolic at all, it genuinely boosted Howl's abilities. Without it, he's just a really talented wizard instead of a borderline deity who can slip between dimensions. This version of Howl learns something terrifying. Having a heart makes him mortal again. For the first time in decades, he can die for real, and the emotional impact of that might hit harder than anything else. Imagine being invincible for half your life and suddenly realizing one stab wound could end everything. Yeah, that's the whole crisis on its own. Then there's my personal favourite folklore-based theory, the one that says the heart itself has agency now, not like a pet, but like a thing that got used to being wild and independent. It spent decades floating in a demon, burning, flying, experiencing magic from the inside out, so coming back into a human body, that's confinement, right? So some fans like to imagine the heart resisting, acting out, making Howl feel emotional spikes that he doesn't understand, like he's relearning himself through this organ that barely remembers how to be human. And that brings us right to where part 3 starts. Given everything this heart has been through, what does its new life actually look like? What becomes normal for Howl? What changes forever? What becomes of his magic, his relationship with Sophie, and his emotional stability? Part 3 is where we'll finally answer the actual big question. So, what really happened to Howl's heart after the movie? We've talked about the heart. We've talked about the consequences. We've talked about what it remembers, what it carries, all the magical mythology baggage that it drags in like someone returning home with 18 suitcases and no explanation. Now it's finally time to talk about the actual thing we came here for. What really happens to Howl's heart after the movie ends? As always, no, we're not pretending there's one true canon answer. Ghibli doesn't work like that. Miyazaki gives you feelings, symbolism, images, contradictions, and then you are supposed to feel the truth rather than read it off of a wiki. So in part 3, we're putting everything together. All the emotional consequences, all the magic implications, all the folklore angles, all the little hints that the movies drop without drawing circles around them. And from that, we're going to explore the 3 main theories that fans gravitate towards the most. Before we get there, let's reset the stage, because this is important. When the movie ends, Howl is newly rehearted, emotionally raw, and magically altered. He looks exhausted, relieved, vulnerable, and probably terrified of how much he suddenly feels. And at that moment, the final shot where he and Sophie float above a flying castle like it's a cute epilogue is actually just the start of something much messier. Because the story doesn't really end when Sophie puts the heart back, it begins. Theory 1. The heart turns Howl human again, for real this time. This is one of the most popular interceptions ever, and honestly, it fits the movie's vibe better than almost anything else. Here's the core idea. Howl basically becomes fully human for the first time since childhood, and the heart's return forces him to grow up. The reason this is so believable is because one single frame in the movie, after Sophie gives him the heart, Howl sits up, touches his chest, and looks genuinely overwhelmed. Not scared, not dramatic, just stunned. That look is not, yay, I'm cured, it's, holy crap, what is happening inside of me? Fans think this moment is the beginning of emotional maturity, grounded decision making, the ability to love without fear, the ability to be loved without running away, the ability to care about the world without collapsing under the responsibility. This theory says that Sophie didn't just fix his heart, she literally rebooted his emotional system. She gave him back the ability to feel fully, in all directions, joy, hurt, grief, fear, love, and he accepts it because he finally has someone to navigate it with. Under this interpretation, Howl's heart becomes a normal heart again, but with a deeper range. It beats harder, it feels more, he learns who is without all the magical shortcuts. He becomes, for lack of a better term, real. A real man, with a real heart, with real consequences, and here's the kicker, his magic stabilizes but becomes less overwhelming. He's still powerful obviously, but not in that wild, half-desperate, I'll tear you apart and tear the sky if I feel like it kind of way. He grounds out, he focuses, he no longer cheats the laws of nature using the contract, he becomes disciplined, intentional. Fans love this theory because it makes Howl's ending feel like the beginning of adulthood, not in a boring way, just in the, oh wow, he can actually be emotionally present now kind of way. Theory 2, the heart stays magical and changes him permanently. Okay, this is one for the people who believe that Howl is too enchanted, too star-touched, and too deeply tied to fairy tale logic to ever go back to being normal. This theory says that the heart doesn't go all the way back to normal. It stays half star, half human, permanently fused with Calcifer's history. Basically, the heart becomes something new, not a demon, not a star, not a human, but a hybrid. People love this one because it explains why Howl doesn't suddenly become fragile or mortal. Instead, he becomes a different kind of powerful, not otherworldly, but not regular either, a magical being with emotional regulation installed. The theory is, Howl gains new magical abilities, but he loses some of the chaotic old ones. His emotionals now directly fuel his power, meaning that love makes him stronger and fear makes him weaker, and Sophie becomes a stabilizer, not because she controls him, but because the heart gravitated towards her when she saved it. This theory also loves the idea that Calcifer left behind an imprint, like emotional residue, not enough to count as a second soul, but enough that Howl sometimes gets flashes of heat, memory, or intuition that aren't originally his. Not trauma, just a reminder. That heart carried a fire demon for decades. It won't forget that overnight. And honestly, that fits the movie's fairy tale logic perfectly. You can't just undo decades of magic with one kiss energy. This version of Howl becomes something rare. He becomes a wizard whose magic is now powered by his humanity, not his control, which is actually more dangerous, but also more meaningful. This is the romantic, mystical, emotional fantasy ending that fans adore. Theory 3. The heart keeps a piece of Calcifer forever. Now we enter the dark or bittersweet interpretations. The Calcifer and Howl were never truly separate theory. This one has two flavors, symbolic and literal. The symbolic version is that the heart remembers the bond, and Howl carries that emotional history for the rest of his life. He becomes more empathetic, more aware, more cautious, more protective, especially the people who carried him through the worst parts of his life, Calcifer, Sophie, and Markle. The heart, in this version, returns with a shadow of the flame inside it, not burning but warm, not alive but imprinted. Fans of this version say this explains why Howl seems calmer and softer at the end. He's finally processing what Calcifer endured for him. Literal version. This one is for the real theorists out there. The version says Calcifer didn't completely leave, not in a he's stuck inside Howl kind of way, more like a spark clung to the heart, a magical echo, a seed, something tiny, something harmless, something deeply symbolic. Something that stays with Howl like a reminder, you lived because someone loved you enough to burn for you. This version hits emotionally because it suggests Howl's heart is no longer alone. It now carries traces of two beings, Howl's original humanity and the fire demon who shared its life. It's like a scar, but a beautiful one. Fans who like this theory say it's why Howl feels different, because the heart is now something more like a magical artifact than a simple organ. So which one is right? What actually happens? Here's the thing, and this is the part that makes Miyazaki's stories so fun to obsess over. None of these theories contradict the movie, not one of them. You can watch the final scene and interpret it in three completely different ways, and all of them fit the symbolism, the tone, the mythology, and the emotional logic of Howl as a character. So, the real answer? Howl's heart becomes something new, something changed, something alive in a way that it hasn't been for decades, and the rest of his life is shaped by the transformation. Whether that means that he becomes more human, or more magical, or more intertwined with Calcifer, or more bound to Sophie, or more powerful, or more vulnerable, is entirely up to how you read the story. Howl's heart doesn't go back to being what it was, it evolves, and honestly, that's the entire plot. The whole film, from the first spell to the last shot, it's about change, growing up, accepting love, facing fear, letting people see who you are. So what happens to Howl's heart? It finally learns how to belong to him again, messily, complicatedly, and beautifully. It's not a happy ever after, it's a finally. Now the real story begins.